Is there someone I can help you find? I'm here for the meeting. Rodrigo Santos, Santos Bridge Capital. Victoria Crane looked at him the way a woman looks at a piece of furniture that has appeared in the wrong room. The 11 o'clock. She did not extend her hand. We were expecting someone from your firm, but... She glanced at his attaché case, at his shoes, at the small gap between what she had imagined and what was standing in front of her. I assumed we'd be meeting with someone more, Senior. I am the founder, Rodrigo said. His voice was level, unhurried. Of course you are. She said it the way people say of course when they mean the opposite. Well, come in then. What Victoria Crane did not know in that moment, what she could not have known, because she had never looked closely enough at the man in front of her to find out, was that Rodrigo Santos had financed the construction of 3 hospitals, a university campus, and 11 kilometers of coastal road in the southern Philippines before he was 40 years old. She was about to find out. But first, before we go any further, type 777 in the comments below and tell us where you are watching from. If this story already has your attention, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and stay with us, because what happens in the next 11 minutes is the kind of thing you will be telling people about tomorrow. Rodrigo Santos was born in Mayasin, the capital of southern Leyte, in a province where the sea is always visible from the road and the morning smell of salt and diesel from the fishing boats coming in. His father, Benedicto Santos, Tatay Ben, to everyone who loved him, owned a small fishing vessel that he ran with 2 hired hands and an engine that needed coaxing every 3rd morning. He was not a rich man. He was not a poor man either, in the way that the word poor implies an absence of something that matters. He had his boat, he had his family. He had the specific dignity of a man who works with his hands and never borrowed against tomorrow what he could not repay by Thursday. His mother, Nanay Perla, taught grade 4 at the elementary school on the hill. She graded papers at the kitchen table after dinner with a red pen she kept behind her ear like a standing invitation. She believed in 3 things absolutely: the church, the value of education, and the idea that a child who is taught to read carefully will never be fully powerless, no matter what the world does to them. Rodrigo was their eldest. He understood what that meant before he was old enough to say it out loud. It meant he was the proof of concept, the one who would show the younger ones that the family's ambitions were not naive. He was a serious student, not the kind who shows off seriousness, the kind who is simply never somewhere else in their mind when they should be paying attention. He graduated at the top of his class at Southern Lady State University with a degree in accounting. He passed the CPA board on his first attempt. Then he applied for a student visa to the United States and was accepted into a master's program at the University of Illinois on a partial scholarship. The night before he left, Tatay Ben brought him into the small room off the kitchen, the one that had always smelled of rope and engine oil and the particular residue of a working man's life. He set a box on the table between them. Inside was an attaché case, brown leather, brass clasps, the kind of case that had been expensive once and was already beginning to show the signs of a life it had not yet lived. Tatay Ben had been setting aside money for 2 years. Not a dramatic sum, a sum that required discipline, a sum that meant choosing something over something else, month after month, without complaint and without announcement. I saved it myself, Tatay Ben said. Every paper you carry in it is proof that a Santos worked for something. He paused. His hands rested on the edge of the table, rough-palmed, salt-weathered. And, Rodrigo, listen to me now. His voice dropped slightly, the way voices drop when a thing is being said for the first and last time. When you get there, and people will look at you the way people look when they have already decided something before you open your mouth. Remember this. He looked at his son. A man who needs to make you feel small has already told you everything about his own size. Rodrigo held that sentence the way you hold something you know you will need later. He carried the attaché case to Manila. He carried it onto the plane. He carried it through O'Hare International Airport at 2 in the morning with $40 in his wallet and an address written on the back of an envelope. He carried it through graduate school, through his first job at an accounting firm in Chicago, where he was the only Filipino on the floor and the only one who came in early enough to make the first pot of coffee. He carried it when he left that firm at 31 to start something of his own. When the first office was a shared desk in a co-working space in the Loop. When the first client was a Filipino-owned construction company that needed someone who understood both sides of the Pacific. When the second client came because the first one called them. When the 10th client came because the firm's reputation had begun to move faster than Rodrigo himself. He carried it the morning he registered Santos Bridge Capital as a formal investment management company in an office with 3 employees and a coffee machine that they had all chipped in to buy. By the time Rodrigo Santos was 57 years old, Santos Bridge Capital managed cross-border infrastructure assets between the Philippines and the United States. $800 million under active management, 43 completed projects, a portfolio that stretched from Mindanao to Michigan, a name that, in certain boardrooms in Manila and in certain development circles in the Midwest, meant something specific: serious money, serious discipline, serious people. The attaché case had new clasps now. Rodrigo had replaced them twice. The leather had darkened with age. The corners had worn soft. He carried it to every meeting. He was carrying it the morning he walked into the Hargrove Meridian offices on the 41st floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago for an 11 o'clock appointment that his managing director, Amor Reyes, had spent 6 weeks arranging. Hargrove Meridian was the kind of company that existed to remind you of the difference between buildings and monuments. Their projects were not simply developments, they were statements. Luxury mixed-use towers in emerging urban corridors, marketed to exactly the kind of buyers who use the word curated as a noun. Their brochures were printed on paper that cost more per sheet than most people spent on lunch. Their conference rooms had views that were themselves a form of argument. Victoria Crane had run the company for 9 years. She had taken it from a mid-tier regional developer to a nationally recognized name through a combination of genuine talent, relentless self-promotion, and the particular kind of confidence that comes from never having been seriously wrong in a room that made you pay for it. She was 52, impeccable, the kind of woman whose posture alone communicated that she had not arrived anywhere by accident. She was also, as Rodrigo was about to discover, the kind of woman who made up her mind about a person in the first 4 seconds and spent the rest of the meeting defending that first impression regardless of evidence. Marcus Webb had brought Rodrigo in. Marcus was the VP of Acquisitions at Hargrove Meridian. He was 44, precise, thorough, and one of 4 black executives at a company of 300 people. He had been tracking Santos Bridge Capital for 8 months before he made the approach. He had read every public filing, every press mention, every infrastructure completion report. He had flown to Manila on his own time to walk the sites of 2 completed Santos Bridge projects and speak with the local contractors. He came back convinced. More than convinced. He had written a 12-page internal memo describing Rodrigo Santos as the single most strategically aligned investor they could bring into the Meridian Tower project. The project needed a $150 million anchor commitment. Marcus believed Santos Bridge would not only commit, but would bring credibility that would unlock 3 additional co-investors he had already identified. He had briefed Victoria personally. He had sent her Rodrigo's biography, the firm's track record, a summary of completed projects. He had been specific and thorough. He was not specific enough about one thing. He had assumed it would not matter. The morning of the meeting, Rodrigo arrived 4 minutes early, signed in at the front desk, and was shown to a waiting area on the 41st floor. The assistant who brought him there offered water, which he accepted. He sat with the attaché case across his knees and looked at the Chicago skyline through the glass. Victoria appeared 12 minutes later. She came around the corner from the direction of her office, mid-conversation with a colleague, and stopped when she saw Rodrigo rise from his chair. Her expression did not change dramatically. That was the thing about Victoria. Her cruelty was architectural. It was built into the pauses, the glances, the barely perceptible adjustments of her posture that communicated, without a single actionable word, that the person in front of her had not met expectations. "Is there someone I can help you find?" Those 6 words, said to a man who had made an appointment 6 weeks in advance, said to a man whose firm was the reason this meeting existed, said to a man whose entire biography had been sent to her inbox. "I'm here for the meeting. Rodrigo Santos, Santos Bridge Capital." The pause before she answered was 3 seconds long enough to be a message. "We were expecting someone from your firm, but that glance, the case, the suit, which was good but not ostentatious, which was the kind of suit a man wears when he wants to be taken seriously and does not need to announce it. I assumed we'd be meeting with someone more senior." "I am the founder," Rodrigo said. "Of course you are." She led him into the boardroom. 9 executives were seated around a table long enough to park a car on. Crystal pitchers of water, legal pads fresh from the pad, the particular smell of a room that gets cleaned every morning and used to exercise power every afternoon. Marcus Webb was at the far end of the table. He stood when Rodrigo entered. He extended his hand. His face said something his mouth did not, a warning and an apology, both at once. Victoria gestured to a chair at the far end of the table, 3 seats away from her own. Not the seat beside her, where a serious anchor investor might reasonably expect to sit. 3 seats down. The kind of placement that says, "You are here at our invitation," which is not the same as being here as our partner. Rodrigo set his attaché case on the table. He opened it. He produced a proposal document, clean-bound, 41 pages. He had brought 9 copies. He distributed them himself, moving around the table, setting one in front of each executive because no one had offered to help him. Victoria looked at the document without opening it. "I want to ask you something directly," she said. Her voice carried the smooth authority of someone who has been the most important person in every room for so long that directness feels like generosity. "Santos Bridge Capital is a..." She paused. "A Philippines-based firm. We are headquartered in Chicago," Rodrigo said, "with a Manila office and active project portfolios in both markets." "Right." She nodded slowly, as if filing this under a category she had already created. "I just want to make sure we're aligned on the scale of what we're discussing here. Meridian Tower is a $150 million commitment. Lead position. This isn't a co-investment opportunity. We need a firm that can anchor the round and command the confidence of our co-investors." She looked directly at Rodrigo as she said the last sentence. He looked back at her. "We are familiar with the project structure," he said. "That is why we requested this meeting." "I don't doubt that." She picked up his proposal, turned it over once, set it back down without opening it. "I just want to be transparent with you. Our previous lead investors have been institutional, major firms, Names that our lenders and co-investors recognize without needing an introduction. She did not say what she meant. She did not need to. Marcus Webb's pen had stopped moving. He was looking at his legal pad with an expression that a man wears when he is deciding, in real time, whether he is willing to pay a price. Rodrigo reached into the attaché case and placed a second document on the table. A single page. Project summary sheet. 12 completed projects. Total completed infrastructure value. Current assets under management. 3 active co-investments with firms whose names Victoria Crane absolutely recognized. He slid it across the table to her. She looked at it. A brief look, barely a full second. Then she pushed it back. "I appreciate you coming in," she said. "I think what might work better is if you gave us some time to review the materials, and then perhaps we could schedule a follow-up with Marcus and one of our junior acquisitions team." Junior acquisitions team. The room went absolutely still. Not the silence of people who had not heard. The silence of people who had heard exactly and were calculating what it would cost them to say so. Rodrigo did not speak for a moment. He looked at the document she had pushed back across the table. He looked at Victoria. He looked at the 9 executives who were looking at their legal pads, their water glasses, the middle distance, anywhere except at him. He picked up the document. He placed it back inside the attaché case. He closed the clasps, one, then the other. The small brass sound was very loud in the quiet room. He stood up. "Thank you for your time," he said. His voice was the same as it had been at the beginning. Level, unhurried. The voice of a man whose temperature does not change because someone else raised theirs. He picked up the 9 copies of his proposal from around the table, moving at the same measured pace, collecting them one by one, folding each one shut. He took his time, not as a statement, simply because a man who has never been careless with his work does not become careless with it in front of an audience. He carried the documents and the attaché case to the door. Victoria said, "We'll be in touch." He did not respond to that. He walked through the glass doors, through the 41st floor hallway, into the elevator. The doors closed. The city dropped away beneath him, floor by floor. He rode to the lobby in silence. At the front desk, the same assistant who had offered him water looked up. He returned the visitor badge without a word. He walked through the revolving door onto the sidewalk. The November wind came off the lake and hit his face, and he stood in it for a moment, his hand on the attaché case, and he breathed. Then he took out his phone and called Amor Reyes. "How did it go?" she asked. Rodrigo watched a cab turn the corner onto Michigan Avenue. "Redirect everything," he said. "Call Vela Pacific." Marcus Webb stayed in the boardroom for 7 minutes after Rodrigo left. He did not speak during those 7 minutes. He sat with his hands flat on the table while Victoria moved the meeting forward as if the preceding 22 minutes had been an unremarkable administrative interruption. On the 7th minute, he stood. He excused himself. He walked to his office and closed the door. He sat at his desk and looked at the wall and thought about the 12-page memo he had written, about the flight to Manila on his own time, about the 2 Santos Bridge projects he had walked, about the local contractors who had spoken about Rodrigo Santos the way workers speak about someone who showed up, did what they said they would do, and left the place better than they found it. He thought about what had just happened in that boardroom. Then he opened his desk drawer and took out a business card. Rodrigo Santos had given it to him at their first conversation, 6 months ago, before any of this began. Marcus had kept it in the drawer the whole time. A plain card, cream stock, blue letters. He held it for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. Amor Reyes moved fast. That was what she did. It was what she had always done in 12 years working alongside Rodrigo, in 4 countries, across more projects than she could count without a spreadsheet. She had an engineer's mind and a diplomat's patience, and she was, on her best days, the most efficient person Rodrigo had ever trusted with anything. She made the call to Vela Pacific Group before the end of the afternoon. Vela Pacific was Hargrove Meridian's closest competitor in the Chicago luxury development market. They had been chasing a lead investor for a project called Cascade Yards, a $140 million mixed-use development 2 blocks north of the site where Meridian Tower was planned. Same corridor, same target tenant profile, same co-investor universe. They had been chasing that investor for 4 months without success. Amor's call lasted 18 minutes. By the end, Santos Bridge had committed as lead investor in Cascade Yards. Rodrigo added $10 million to the commitment. Not because the project required it, because he wanted the number to be specific and the message to be unmistakable. $150 million. Exactly the amount he had been prepared to commit to Meridian Tower, going 2 blocks north, into the hands of the one firm in Chicago that could make that hurt the most. He called Ambassador Celestine Aquino Park's office that evening. The ambassador was an old colleague. More than a colleague, she was one of the people who had believed in Santos Bridge early, who had made introductions at a time when introductions were the difference between a door opening and a door staying closed. They had worked together on 3 community development initiatives along the lakeshore. She understood the significance of what Rodrigo was about to announce. She offered the consulate's atrium for the press event. Rodrigo asked her to chair it. 12 days after Rodrigo Santos walked out of the Hargrove Meridian boardroom, the joint press statement went live. It was issued simultaneously by Santos Bridge Capital, Vela Pacific Group, and the Philippine Consulate General in Chicago. The timing was 9 a.m. Central. Business markets were open. Phones were already in hands. The headline was clean and factual, the way headlines are when the facts are already dramatic enough. Santos Bridge Capital anchors $150 million investment in Cascade Yards development project. The statement included Rodrigo's full biography, his father's fishing boat in southern Leyte, the student visa, the night shifts as a hospital janitor, the shared desk in the Loop, the 43 completed projects, the $800 million under management, the Forbes Asia recognition, the infrastructure projects that had brought running water to 14 villages in eastern Visayas, and a dialysis center to a municipality that had previously sent its patients 4 hours by boat. It included a single quote from Rodrigo Santos. 11 words. Capital has no accent. Competence has no passport. Dignity is non-negotiable. The statement did not mention Hargrove Meridian by name. It did not need to. The financial press understood the geography immediately. 2 blocks north, same corridor, same week. The story wrote itself, and once it was written, the diaspora carried it. The Filipino community across the United States shared the statement the way communities share proof that one of their own had not been diminished. It traveled from Chicago to Los Angeles, to New York, to Dubai, to Riyadh, to Doha. Every city where Filipino workers and professionals had built lives far from the provinces where they were born. Each share added a layer of context. Each comment added a name. By the second morning, the statement had more than 400,000 views. By the third morning, a journalist named Claire Santos, no relation, had published the first investigative piece. Claire was 34 years old. She wrote for a financial news platform that covered the Asian American business community specifically, and had been doing so for 7 years with the particular combination of patience and persistence that investigative work requires. She had been following Santos Bridge Capital for 2 years. She had Rodrigo's phone number in her contacts. She called Marcus Webb on day 4. He answered. Claire's first article ran on a Thursday. The headline, Filipino billionaire investor turned away at Chicago firm. His next meeting was 2 blocks away. The second article ran the following Monday. The headline, 5 Asian investors described the same treatment at Hargrove Meridian. They asked if I was sure I had the right building. Claire had found them through a combination of public event records, LinkedIn, and 2 phone calls that led to 3 more. 5 investors, Philippine American, Chinese American, Korean American, Indian American. Different names, different firms, different years, identical experience. Every one of them had been met with visible skepticism. Every one of them had been redirected to junior staff. Every one of them had been questioned in language that never crossed a legal line but never needed to, about whether they were sufficiently institutional, sufficiently senior, sufficiently serious. None of them had ever been invited back. None of them had said anything publicly. Until now. The story moved fast. Within a week, 3 of Hargrove Meridian's largest institutional lenders had reached out to Victoria's office requesting explanations. 2 of them used the phrase reputational risk in their emails. A third used a more precise phrase, fiduciary concern related to discriminatory business practices. Victoria issued a public statement, measured, carefully worded, the kind of statement that legal teams produce when the goal is to not say anything that can be used later. She expressed her commitment to inclusive business practices. She invited dialogue. She mentioned the diversity of Hargrove's project portfolio. The statement satisfied nobody. Marcus Webb resigned 4 days after the second article published. His resignation letter was 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph thanked the company for 11 years of professional development. The second paragraph said, simply, that he was no longer able to represent an organization whose leadership had demonstrated, on multiple occasions and in front of witnesses, a willingness to dismiss qualified professionals on the basis of their background. He did not send the letter to Victoria first. He sent it to the board. An hour after it arrived, the board called an emergency session. Victoria Crane walked into that meeting the way she had walked into every meeting for 9 years. Posture straight, cadence controlled. The faint air of someone who has already solved the problem the room is about to spend an hour discussing. She sat down. She looked at the 12 faces around the table. Not one of them looked back. The board chair, a man named Gerald Frost, who had known Victoria since the company's founding, placed a printed document on the table. Claire Santos's first article, printed in full. Beside it, the 5 investor accounts from the second article, printed in full. Beside that, a single-page summary prepared by the board's legal counsel, the exposure analysis. What the 5 investor accounts represented in terms of potential civil liability. What the reputational damage to date had already cost in terms of withdrawn lender interest. 2 lenders had paused their commitments to Meridian Tower, pending the outcome of what was now a public controversy. Gerald Frost looked at her. "I want to give you the opportunity to tell us what happened in that meeting," he said. "In your own words." Victoria told them. She used phrases like due diligence and calibrating fit and ensuring alignment with project scale. She used the word inadvertent once, in reference to any impression that may have been created. She said that she had not been aware of Mr. Santos's full profile at the time of the meeting, which was why she had suggested a follow-up process. Gerald Frost let her finish. He looked at the document in front of him. His biography was emailed to you 6 weeks before the meeting, Gerald said. Marcus Webb's memo included his asset management figures, his completed project list, and his Forbes Asia recognition. You received it on a Tuesday. You receipted it the following Thursday. Victoria opened her mouth. The read receipt is in the legal summary, Gerald said. The room was very quiet. 7 of the 12 people in that meeting have given written accounts to Claire Santos, Gerald continued. 5 of them described the interaction in identical terms. She asked if he was sure he had the right building. That is a quote from 3 separate accounts. 3 people in the same room. Victoria's hands were still on the table. We are prepared to offer you a transition arrangement, Gerald said. It is fair and it is final. The board has voted. She did not argue. That surprised the room. But perhaps it should not have. A woman who had always understood power could recognize at the right moment when she had lost it completely. She left the same afternoon. The civil suit was filed 6 weeks later. Rodrigo did not announce it. Amor Reyes confirmed it when a journalist asked. The suit alleged discriminatory treatment in a commercial setting. The evidence included the written accounts of 7 former Hargrove executives, Marcus Webb's contemporaneous notes from the day of the meeting. He had been taking notes on his phone throughout, a habit of 11 years, and the public statements of the 5 investors Claire Santos had identified. Rodrigo did not give interviews about the lawsuit. He gave one statement, through his attorney, which said what needed to be said. Santos Bridge Capital pursues this matter not for a settlement, but for the record. We do this so that the next investor who walks into a room carrying something other than the expected face is treated according to the merit of what is in their briefcase, not the assumptions about who they are. The case settled 14 months later. The terms were not disclosed. Hargrove Meridian, under its new leadership, issued a full public apology, which was read into the public record at a press conference that Rodrigo did not attend because he had a project review in Manila that week and the projects came first. The Cascade Yards development broke ground on a bright morning in April. There was a ceremony. Hard hat, shovel. The particular quality of applause that only happens when a building is about to exist that did not exist before. Ambassador Aquino Park was there. Marcus Webb was there. Amor Reyes was there. The Vela Pacific team was there. Local community leaders. Representatives from 3 Filipino-American professional organizations. Rodrigo wore the same suit he always wore to these things. He stood at the edge of the crowd while the photographers were working, holding the attaché case with both hands in front of him, watching the sight. A young woman approached him, early 30s. She had a press badge from a business publication he did not know. Mr. Santos, can I ask what you're thinking right now? He looked at the site, at the steel-framed perimeter, at the concrete forms, at the beginning of something. My father was a fisherman, he said. He used to say that the sea does not care what you think of yourself, only what you can do when it is not calm. He paused. I am thinking that this is a good morning to work. 2 blocks south, the site where Meridian Tower had been planned sat quiet. The permits were in a holding pattern. 2 lenders had formally withdrawn. The project had been restructured once and was in the process of being restructured again. The new CEO of Hargrove Meridian was a woman named Priya Vasantha, who had spent 15 years in infrastructure development and had been recruited from a firm in Boston specifically because she understood what the company needed to rebuild. She was deliberate. She was systematic. She had read every one of Claire Santos's articles twice. Her first week, she called Marcus Webb. He came in for coffee. They talked for 2 hours. 3 weeks later, he rejoined the firm as Senior VP of Strategic Partnerships. His first project was a review of Hargrove Meridian's investor engagement process. Every touchpoint from initial outreach to first meeting, to identify where implicit assumptions had been allowed to function as gatekeeping. He was thorough. It took 4 months. The report was 81 pages. The first line read, "The most expensive decision this company ever made lasted 22 minutes. It cost us a relationship we will spend years trying to deserve again." On a Sunday evening in October, Rodrigo Santos sat at a kitchen table in a house in a quiet street in Evanston, across from his sister, his brother-in-law, and his 2 nieces, who were arguing about something that had no importance, and all the importance in the world simultaneously. He had flown in from Manila the previous Friday. He would fly back Monday morning. This was the interval, 48 hours of the ordinary life that the extraordinary one was built to protect. After dinner, his younger niece, who was 11 and had inherited her grandmother's complete indifference to rhetorical questions, sat beside him at the table and said, with the directness of someone who has not yet learned to treat directness as dangerous, "Tito Roding, did the lady say mean things to you because you're Filipino?" He looked at her for a moment. "She said things," he said carefully, "because she had decided what she thought about me before she knew anything about me. And that happens to many people, for many reasons. It is not something you can prevent from happening, but it is something you can choose how to carry." His niece considered this with the focused seriousness of someone doing a math problem. "How did you carry it?" Rodrigo reached for the attaché case on the chair beside him. He opened it, took out nothing, simply felt the worn leather of the interior for a moment, then closed it again. "The same way my father taught me," he said. "You keep the case. You replace the clasps when they wear out, and you carry it back into the next room." His niece nodded, as if this were the most reasonable answer possible. It was the most reasonable answer possible. Outside, the October wind moved through the trees on the quiet street. The lights in the kitchen were warm. The last of the dinner dishes were stacked beside the sink. And in a province on the other side of the world, where a man had once set aside money month after month to buy a piece of leather that would carry his son's work across an ocean, a fishing boat was coming in with the morning catch, the same as it always had. The sea does not care what you think of yourself, only what you can do when it is not calm. Before I end this story, I would like to leave you with this. The world has always had a way of deciding what a person is worth before that person opens their mouth. It does this quickly, quietly, and with great confidence in its own judgment. And for a long time, this worked. Because the people on the wrong end of that judgment had no choice but to absorb it and move on. What Rodrigo Santos understood, what his father had taught him at a kitchen table in southern Leyte, is that a man who needs to diminish you has already told you everything about the ground he is standing on. So the next time someone makes you feel like a guest in a room you earned the right to enter, do not raise your voice. Do not beg for acknowledgement. Pick up your case, close the clasps, and walk toward the door that belongs to someone who has the sense to open it. You only need one door. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in our next story.